This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today we're talking with Nick Pittinger, Director of Data Services at Decisiv. Nick, great to see you again.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so you are bringing us another treasure trove of exclusive data here. You have your Q2 data service report for truck services. What's going on out there in the world? Now, we talked over the summer about Q1 truck service trends. We saw the impact of aging trucks, right? What's the big takeaway from the Q2 2023 truck service data?
I think some of the big takeaways that we're seeing are really focusing around kind of the stabilization of the service activity within the trucks. For Q2 of 2023, we're seeing that this quarter was only down about 0.2% transaction-wise compared to the previous quarter, Q1. Okay. And saw a couple things that jumped out at us around what explains why things are up or down, and highlighted a couple of them in our report. And some of what we were seeing with regards to things that were up were like the 001 AC and heating system, which was up a huge amount of 65%, much higher than what we've seen with many of the other systems when reviewing the quarterly statistics. And our leading indicator there is Q2, things are starting to warm up. People want to get their ACs and stuff prepped for the summer before it gets super hot. Definitely don't want those things breaking down when you're out there on the roads in exacerbating heat.
That's right.
Other things we were seeing, some of the systems that were down during that time, we saw a charging system was down about 13%, and steering was down about 6%. Both of those are due to upticks in operations in Q1, where we saw for charging, we saw the inspection promo happening in Q1 that no longer existed in Q2. Right. And then for steering, I think we talked about it last time as well, there was an uptick there for a steering gear recall in Q1.
Right.
We see that recall is now past its course, no longer happening in Q2. So that was a drop for operations in that particular system.
One thing, I do want to back up for a second. I got excited and I just dived right into the data and what you saw, right? I want to kind of back up for people that might not have joined us last time too. So Decisiv is integrated into lots of service networks. I mean, you're providing data and integrations to make sure all the service management platforms talk to each other. You have your own service relationship management platform that lays on top of that data as well. And when you talk about the codes, you're talking about the VMRS codes. So tell me again, you're tracking those codes as they go through shops, and that's where all this data comes from, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So our dealers, when a truck comes in for service, a lot of the OEM network dealers out there are leveraging the Decisiv SRM ecosystem to be able to create the cases, capture information about the asset, the customer, the truck, help to coordinate communication between the dealers servicing the truck as well as the owner of that truck, or the drivers or responsible parties as that truck is going through the servicing process, and help generate estimates. And along the way, as they're generating the estimates, the dealers are putting details into these are the elements that are broken or need repairs, and as they're doing that, the Decisiv SRM ecosystem is collecting all that information. From there, we're able to run our models to be able to help improve the quality and standardize some of the operations into something that's a little bit more meaningful from a reporting perspective, where we're able to tie all these freeform operations that are happening across the different OEMs, across the dealer networks, happening in different shops, to a standardized nomenclature, where you mentioned VMRS, Vehicle Maintenance Reporting Standards. Right. There are a variety of codes that are used. The one that we're focusing on here is code key 31 for the system. And the goal there is to be able to take a lot of this freeform operations and details that are happening, and can we translate it into something that's, again, a little bit more standardized that we can then be able to more accurately report on, to be able to show trends, cost changes, what's happening in different regions of the U.S. or North America, et cetera.
Right. And I mean, it's a huge number of service events over. I always forget the number that you guys throw out because I would lowball it, because I always think it's much smaller. But I mean, these are huge numbers, daily, monthly, that are going through the Decisiv platform. So it's a good chunk of data there.
That's correct. Yeah, we're definitely we're getting to around 1 million cases per quarter.
Wow. Okay.
And each of those cases could have, 0, 1, or many operation lines associated with it, the different chunks of work. And it's
Right.
those chunks of work that we're then, running our encoding model on top of to be able to standardize and be able to say, this is the tire system, this is power plant, this is electrical, being able to kind of categorize it in a way that's more meaningful for reporting and analysis.
Right, for sure. So we saw, so to go back to it, we saw the AC and the heating systems that upticked here in Q2 as people were getting ready for summer. You mentioned the steering gear, which we did talk about last time, and the recall impact there. One of the other things we did talk about last time too was transmissions, transmission service, and specifically around the automated manual transmissions. We kind of hypothesized there that we saw a lot more service. This could be the first wave of AMTs coming into the shop. They're about 7, 8 years old now as they come into the shop in their second and third lives. How have those service demands changed here in Q2? Are we still seeing that same amount of volume of automated manual transmission service, or has that changed?
Definitely seeing a continued uptick when it comes to the 027 system code for the automated transmissions. For the quarter over quarter, we're seeing that up about 5% in transaction volume. And year over year, we're seeing a 28% bump year over year. So a much bigger spike when it comes compared to what's happening in the servicing space this year compared to last year. To put that in perspective with the more manual transmissions in codes 026, both the quarter over quarter and year over year numbers for the manual transmissions are down 1% and 5% respectively. So this kind of aligns with what we talked about a little bit last time of, we're seeing a little bit more of the growth of the automated transmissions out on the road. We've, known and talked about at times with you and outside and inside of our company as well around, those automated manual transmissions are safer to drive, less driver fatigue. And it's been, from what we've seen or heard, kind of easier to hire drivers and teach them how to operate that type of vehicle versus the manual transmissions that have been out there in the past.
Yes, as someone who has recently gotten his CDL, I will also attest to this. I prefer the AMTs over the manuals. Again, I know that's a different subject, but one thing I did want to touch on, like you said, and you and I have talked before. We've talked on the recording when we're doing this kind of stuff, and we've talked offline too about when we see this data. We kind of make leaps. We make a little intuitive leaps as to why, right? We see the trends and then we kind of hypothesize. So it's not a set in stone cause and effect. I know that in your world of data analysis, we don't want to confuse that, right? But it is really interesting to see that trend continuing, the manuals coming down a little bit because, it was about 7 or 8 years ago that those really started picking up into the 70, 80, 90% ranges in terms of truck builds, right? And so just over time, it was going to be, manuals are going to kind of work their way out. So it'll be interesting to see again when we check next quarter, see if that still continues, or you know what I mean, or if it throws a wrench in it and the numbers kind of go back to what we'd expect.
Yep, very true.
One of the other big things that your new report anticipates is a return to more predictable cycle of service and repair costs, which I think everyone would breathe a sigh of relief because it's been a weird 3 years. It's been a weird 3 or 4 years in the service world. What do you see driving the cost stabilization, or what have we seen so far?
I think some of the reasons that we've seen, through the data and through just industry publications is, some of that explanation could come around with the replacement of some of the aging trucks. So, as some of those older trucks are, being sold to second and third owners and new trucks are coming in to replace them, those new trucks are going to need a little bit less maintenance happening there as they are newer coming off the lines, should have warranties and other things associated with them. So less things breaking. So we think that that's one explanation. Another explanation for some of the more predictable stabilization and stuff of cost specifically was the resumptions of the parts pipeline. Mm-hmm. So for a while there was a backup of getting parts to the dealers, and that was causing a backlog of servicing in a variety of places across North America. Seeing that kind of opening back up and the parts being where they need to be to get those trucks fixed and back on the road in a faster fashion, I think has helped from the cost perspective as well. And another item that we had seen was just around freight volumes. We've seen different publications mentioning that freight volumes have started to stabilize. There's probably a little bit less truck mileage on the road, which means a little bit less breakdowns along the way as well.
Right, for sure. Well, and we had, to your point, this year actually has turned out to be a relatively solid year for truck sales. Manufacturers have been churning trucks out much faster than they were in 22 and definitely in 21. I know order boards are pretty well filling up here for 23 as well, so it'll be interesting to check in with you again here in a couple quarters just to see where those numbers are going and get a sense for what's happening out there in the service world. So, Nick, I thank you for taking the time. Always wonderful catching up with you.
No problem. Thank you very much for the time, Jason.